Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of a disconnect. So I've been in San Francisco, Denver, New York City, and the suburbs, and Washington D.C. So all big metropolitan areas so far in this book tour. Also Toronto. So we have a little bit of the Canadian representation there as well. And what I'm hearing, first of all, is that there's the usual questions that I would have gotten 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago about the SAT and about transcripts and things like that. So there's a little bit of a disconnect given the moment that we're living in right now in higher ed. But at every single stop, there will be questions around what is the impact of research spending on undergraduate education? What is the impact of the Trump administration and its crackdown on campus protests in colleges? What's the impact going to be on higher education? The other big one that I get, Michael, really surrounds AI. We're going to be talking more about that this season, of course, on Future You. But really, what is the future of college? And I think some of this is framed on what's going on in DC, right? There was this big compact that just came out. The Trump administration sent it to 9 institutions. It's a proposal to reform campus operations from reducing the number of international students to requiring standardized tests. And if they sign this compact, again, these 9 colleges and universities that got it, they'll get preferential access to federal funds. So at the time of recording, we don't have anyone that actually signed it. But again, there's stuff about what's going on in DC is clearly on people's minds when they ask about the future of college. I think some of it is also around the declining confidence in higher ed overall. And is this worth spending money on? Clearly affordability keeps cropping up in these conversations. They want to know more about merit aid. They want to know more about financial aid in general. But of course, I think a lot of this is really driven by AI. And, in the middle of this tour, landed this fascinating piece in the New Yorker that we'll link to in the show notes, Michael, that I sent to you, which is "Should College Get Harder?" was the headline. And it really argues some of the things that we've been talking about here, that AI threatens to reshape knowledge work and that college has become drastically easier, even as what we're going to require people to do in the future with AI is actually going to be harder, right? And so the author of this piece talks about, professors prioritizing research over instruction, grade inflation has soared, students study has half as much as they did decades ago. Students are really there for internships and extracurricular activities to really distinguish themselves because grades no longer do that. And their argument was that AI compounds these problems because now students can use chatbots to fake learning and so forth. And so it really reminds me, Michael, of this dinner conversation I had with university leaders in Texas just a couple of months ago. And the conversation at dinner was, well, if AI could develop and teach a course, and if AI can take a course, both of which, by the way, have happened, what's the purpose of the university at the end of the day?
Yeah, it's a good question. By the way, it's interesting to me. I've been on a couple campuses over the fall. In Wichita State, they were one of our listeners actually there. She was asking a lot of questions around grade inflation and some of the artificial intelligence and like sort of the competing supply and demand pressures, if you will, right, on universities for more rigor from companies, if you will, but less rigor perhaps from the students and given habits and things of that nature. And when you sent the New Yorker article, I was reflecting on, I'm curious your take, but I was reflecting on, I felt like it described my college experience quite a bit, actually, with my extracurriculars being the priority in some ways and less my classes. Maybe as a communications major at Ithaca, you had a different experience. But put that aside for a moment. When I think about the purpose, though, of a college or university in the age of AI, the first thing I think about is we really have to be careful, even more so, I think, than in the past, to talk about what segment of higher ed we're talking about. And I'm curious your take on that. But like, the Dartmouth president, she had a piece in the Atlantic on this question and said like, this knowledge view of just knowledge dispensation, if you will, of the university is a very overly simplistic view of what a university or college has done, and so forth, that colleges and universities are much more complex. They do lots of different things.